This is Father Gregory Pine.
And this is Father Joseph Anthony Kress.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Boom. All right. Father Joseph Anthony, we were chatting a little bit before we started the episode, or before we pushed record, and you were recounting to me some sweet Easter glories at UVA in the parish and in the campus ministry. How was it? Highs and lows? What's good? What's going on?
Dude, Jesus is good. He's not in the tomb anymore, baby. No, Jesus is good, and his graces are abundant, and they're phenomenal. And as I was telling you, like, Holy Week is chaotic and all that fun stuff, but some of the beautiful things that have happened in the midst of that chaos is that we had here at the parish what ended up being about 25 people receive sacraments throughout the Triduum. And we had, I think, what was it, 4 baptisms, like 16 people coming into the church, or 17 people coming in the church, and then another 4 confirmations, people who just are completing their sacraments of initiation. And out of that 25, I think 20 of them were college students. All 4 of the baptisms were college students and things. So like it was something that like kind of arrested me when I looked out there and saw all of this. And I think there was like one person over the age of 40 there. Not that I'm an ageist or anything like that, but it really is a stark reminder in seeing that there's this deep hunger for the Lord, who is the way, the truth, and the life. And people are responding to that. And they're making sacrifices in entering into full communion and receiving baptism and the sacraments. One of the things that I like, for personal reasons and just, individually, it meant a lot to me that I looked at, and I think out of all those 20 students, I felt like there was nobody there that like I had to really hustle after or anything. Like the students that were joining the church, students that were receiving baptism, and I had so many students that were sponsoring other students as well. The ones that were joining the church and receiving the sacraments were there because their friends invited them to Mass. It was their friends who pulled them into a Bible study. And like their first contact with ministry was through their peers. And it was the peers that were drawing them, inviting them into that, and encouraging them to receive sacraments, encouraging them to seek baptism. And I did minimal facilitation of that, but it was really the students themselves inviting each other. And that's like, oh my gosh, so happy to see that, and just very blessed. Hashtag blessed, baby. Just hashtag blessed. That's all I am.
Yeah, I mean, apropos of what you just said, 2 small thoughts. One is, I love the idea, there are a lot of images that are proposed for the church, but in those images, it's good to kind of place yourself, like what role do I play in this image? So if you talk about the church as the bride of Christ, you talk about the image of the church as the people of God, you're like, okay, where do I fit within this? One that I've heard, is that, like that the church is the church militant, right? So the church on earth is the church militant. And so there's
right.
a kind of, like a belligerent sense, almost like we're on the attack, we're on the move. And so you have this sense of, like the church as what, like an army encampment. And I've heard some people say that like priests are responsible for camp maintenance, or you can think about the way that Pope Francis talks about like this idea of a field hospital. Priests are kind of responsible for camp maintenance, and then lay people are responsible for like managing the frontiers, as it were, whatever, skirmishes and sorties and stuff like that. Now, do priests lead their people into battle? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So you don't want to insist upon an image with too terrible of simplicity. But I like this idea, like this idea, this reality that your students are missionary disciples, and that they're the ones who are getting out and getting after it. It's sweet.
Love it.
Yeah, my last experience of something along these lines in Switzerland was, I went to like Swiss World Youth Day, which I guess they have on off years.
Not World Youth Day?
Yeah, so they call it World Youth Day so as to, insist on the continuity between World Youth Day and World Youth Day. But it was out in the, whatever you call it, the eastern part of Switzerland, where everyone speaks German. So it was like the Weltjugendtag. And, it was a similar experience where sometimes in a secular country, you feel like as a believer, you're kind of wandering around in the darkness, and you're cold and you're wet and you're lost and you're tired and things are pretty miserable. But then it's like you happen upon one of those three-sided Appalachian Trail kind of like shelters or whatever you call those things, and it's like there's like a fire prepared
Yeah,
already for
yeah.
you in there, and then there's delicious food and drink and a cigar to smoke, and you're like, holy smokes, like life is
It's
doable.
good.
So when
Yeah.
you encounter these collections of people or these meetings of young people who are very fervent and zealous, for me it's like that. It's like I've been wandering around in the cold, in the wet, in the tired, at darkness. I should probably use a noun at some point in this list. And then you encounter a place in which the faith is very vibrant and flourishing. So, the liturgies that I celebrated did not involve anyone receiving any sacraments that they had not received previously. But I did have this experience on Divine Mercy Sunday weekend, which was, while not of the same magnitude, it kind of communicated to me something of the same joy.
Mm-hmm.
So, boom, this is our life.
Love it.
All right, in this episode, we're going to talk about Marian Apparitions. Why? Because Marian Apparitions are the entire point of our Christian faith. No. Although,
No.
G.K. Chesterton once said that Mariolatry is he said it's the badge and boast of every papist. Now, was he being purposefully, what would you call it at that point? He was being purposefully contrary or being purposefully inflammatory? Perhaps, okay? But there is a sense in which whenever you're in Catholic circles, the Blessed Mother comes up, and it's for good reason. Again, not because she is of greater importance than the Trinity or the incarnate Lord, but she gives us an entry into the whole of the Christian life, and she does so in a way that is wonderful. So, Father Joseph Anthony, when you talk to people about the Blessed Virgin Mary and Marian apparitions, do you have a typical starting point or a kind of go-to image or a way in which to introduce the conversation?
Yeah, I think when I discuss it, especially with those that are unfamiliar, whether they're Protestants or, sometimes you do find Catholics that are not very comfortable and familiar with Marian devotions and things like that. So it's how do you encourage that? How do you introduce that? I begin to kind of talk about the uniqueness of our humanity is the fact that we are body soul unity, that we have spiritual realities, but also physical reality and natural realities. And so what we see in our natural life isn't foreign to our spiritual life. So we have natural mother, and so too we have a spiritual mother. In becoming and through our baptism being united as in union with Jesus Christ himself, we then take on his mother as well to be our spiritual mother. And so it makes sense then that there is a certain devotion and kind of I don't want to say pride of place, but preference for turning to Our Lady to build a relationship with her as she then directs us back to her Son. And I think for many people, they see that devotion to the Blessed Mother as almost an end in itself, as if like that is enough. But always encouraging people to say like, no, it's in devotion and union to the Blessed Mother that she actually directs us closer to her Son. And so to kind of establish her as this like not surprise and not a foreign concept, because we know what it's like to have a relationship with a mother and how that's supposed to look and how that is engaged with, but to see that on the spiritual level, but it's ordered towards union with her Son. And so that is just not the end in itself. So that's kind of how I initially begin to talk about it, and then we can start talking about other things, whether it's devotion to the Rosary or Chaplet of the Seven Sorrows of Our Lady, talking about messages and Marian apparitions and all of that. That all kind of flows from that first understanding of her role within connection, union with her Son.
Yeah. At this point, as I was thinking back, we've done quite a few episodes on the Blessed Virgin Mary, because you were saying before we push record, you had recorded episodes recently on Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Guadalupe. We had one on Lepanto. We had one on Our Lady, Mother of the Church. I think we also had one on the Rosary. So,
yeah, we did Rosary too.
We are just absolute suckers for the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Big fans.
So, in this episode, focusing on the phenomenon, the reality of Marian apparitions, I think a good way in which to broach the particular topic is to ask, like, what's the point, or why bother? Because you'll hear this distinction between public revelation and private revelation. Right, so public revelation is revealed or is made manifest in our Lord Jesus Christ in its perfection and in its completion. So we talk about the period of public revelation comes to its end or comes to its conclusion with the death of the last apostle. So what we are doing then downstream of, whenever that would be, 90 AD, something like that, we are unpacking the contents of a gift that has been communicated to us in its fullness. So when the Blessed Mother appears, that would pertain to private revelation.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are different levels of approbation. Some of these apparitions are kind of taken up by the universal church. They're enshrined in the church's calendar. Some of them would be approved, by the local bishop. Some of these are still ongoing, like alleged apparitions ongoing. And so they remain as yet to be proved in their entirety. But, we notice a kind of gradation, but there's always a sense that it's private revelation. And so some people are inclined to say, like, I don't need to bother myself with it. Or, not only is it of secondary importance, but it's of a trivial importance.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we want to kind of push back against that a little bit, and maybe taking as our starting point or our jumping off point this idea where you described how we have a mother in the supernatural order. And if you were ever to tell your mother in the natural order that, like, she told you everything that you needed to know by the age of 18, and then since then, there's really nothing that she can communicate to you, I think you'd probably get beat. Unless your mother was not inclined to such type of interaction, and then you might get something else. Fill in the appropriate past perfect participle. So what do you think? All right, it's private revelation. It is of a secondary importance, and yet it's important. Okay, so how do you frame that? How do we frame that? How do we go about describing that or getting at that reality?
Well, I think it's, the easiest way to say is it's not nothing, right? It's not it's not nothing here. But it's not, in a sense, like you were saying, it's not this new piece of revelation that's like, oh my gosh, never, this shatters and reorients and changes everything for us. It's that kind of, like you said, kind of unpacking and knowing the Blessed Mother's role is always to direct back to her son. So when she does appear in a new instance or gives a new message or some kind of communicates something new in a private revelation, I'm using new there, it's a way to highlight some aspect of her son's mission and revelation when he was here on earth, and how that's continually experienced throughout the generations, right? Through grace in the life of virtue and grace in the church. So what she is doing, in a sense, is basically repeated reminders of maybe a different facet of the Lord's work here on earth and his continued mission now seated at the right hand of the Father. So she's given these permissions, and it's an extraordinary grace, but it's as a way to help us remember and remind ourselves of the work that her son, our Lord Jesus, did accomplish and continues to work through the sending of his Holy Spirit and the grace and virtues of the church. So I think when we look at it that way, is it's not like each new instance, like each different apparition or message or whatever it may be, is yes, private revelation. And through the different decrees of the church, it said like, okay, this is trustworthy and this is applicable to a greater, broader sense as a reminder of something else that her son did. So it's always oriented and drawing back to that. It's kind of like a way to highlight in a specific way something unique.
All right, here's an image that I've never tested out before, nor did I think of previous to 5 minutes ago. So we're going to see how far this analogy takes us. All right, so Our Lady is often likened to the church itself, because she's a kind of icon of the church's active receptivity, of the church's disposition, kind of vis-a-vis the Lord, her contemplative disposition, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now, St. Thomas has some cool arguments about why we build churches and worship in churches. And he gives lists. I'm not going to list the list, one, because I don't remember the whole list, but also because I don't think that all of these things apply. But one of the things he says is that it helps to cultivate devotion to worship in a church, because you sacralize the place insofar as it's a dedicated space. There are also prayers that are used in a particular way to dedicate that space to the purpose of worship. So it's set aside, it's consecrated. But also he says when a lot of people come together in the same place for the same end, it again has a way of sanctifying the reality. And it's in those spaces, right, where it feels as if heaven and earth are somehow closer, or like the division between heaven and earth is thinner or more porous or something like that. Now, places where Our Lady appears kind of participates something of this character. All right, insofar as Our Lady is like the church, so too where she appears become in a certain sense like churches. Insofar as that, like division between heaven and earth becomes thinner or more porous, and because it calls people together so as to, stir up zeal, stir up devotion, and kind of create a space of receptivity for the gospel, for the preaching and teaching of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I think that that's a lot of times when people go to these places, they describe it in those terms, right? They describe it as a place of peace or of rest, contemplation. They describe it as a place of miracles or blessing or whatever, consecration. And I think it's like that. All right. So there's a way in which we can say place in two different ways. Place is, what we typically think about place. It's like where something is contained, but place is also where someone exercises his or her influence or his or her power. And so I think that we want to say that Our Lady is there in those sites in a particular way, in appearing first, but also in a kind of abiding presence, and that she draws these places to herself by a kind of maternal care and maternal solicitude. And as a result of which, when we go to them, we feel that, we experience that, not necessarily in a visceral way, like, ooh, fascinating, but in the sense that when you're there, you want to be there. And when you've left, you lament the fact that you have left. And the way in which you feel homesick, or in the way in which you miss your mom, or, however you want to describe it. So Our Lady is like the church. She kind of consecrates the places where she exercises this ecclesial charism. Help me work that out, or say something completely different insofar as, I don't know if that merits further comment, but
I think that's a unique way of looking at it, but not unhelpful at all. And I'm going to go back to, like, once again, one of my favorite apparitions, and one I'm closest to, is Lourdes. And so what does that communicate? So let's play this out, right? Where did the Blessed Mother appear? Well, she appeared at basically the city trash heap, the dump, the refuge place. And so what that communicates to us is, like, actually this place that of its very self is unattended and not desirable, but then it becomes this place of great grace and transformation, this great location of kind of pulling back that veil. So the things that in our lives are maybe places that we don't are the not the pristine places, can be this location for great healing and grace. So I think there's, as we would talk about, there's nothing accidental about the places in both, geography, but also in history. So the times that our Blessed Mother does appear in these places, there's no accident in that. It's very intentional, and to whom she does appear. So we can learn a lot from that. Take Guadalupe, for example. Okay, the time and the place where she appeared was extremely important for the conversion of the native people in Mexico, in all of that country, and that's continued to have its influence even to this present day. So I think if you look at that and start to understand, like you said, that she does embody this kind of church-like figure of putting us in a more, I don't want to say it, like just a direct contact with the Lord, that there isn't any obstacles or less mitigation in that sense. It's more direct, and that those places, also those apparitions, can facilitate that with those that make the pilgrimages, or those that hear that message and follow the instructions in that way.
In the time that remains, maybe we could just touch on a few Marian apparitions and the way in which they realize the ideal that we've set forward, how they serve as a kind of maternal love, or how they serve as a gospel reminder, or how they serve as a peculiar place in which heaven and earth meet. I was thinking, when you're talking about Guadalupe, I remember the first time I studied Guadalupe, just preparing a homily for the feast day itself. It was something like, on average, in the years that followed, for like the next half century, it was like over 3,000 people converted on it, like every day, right? So it wasn't every day that 3,000 people converted, but if you take it all together and then divide it by the number of days, between the moment she appeared and then, like, I think it was like the subsequent, whatever, decade or couple, it worked out to be over 3,000 people a day, which is like a Pentecost every day. Which is
Dude, that is so cool. Oh,
Yeah, but like you think about the way that she accommodated the gospel message, in no way taking away from it, right?
No.
She doesn't
Yeah.
dilute the gospel message, but she translates it in a way that is more easily received by her children. So she's like, all right, I'm going to appear to you as a mestiza woman who is pregnant, identifiably so, but who is arrayed with all of the symbology of
Yeah.
the Aztec, like pantheon in a way that shows me supreme,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it shows me as one bearing he who is yet most supreme. And so, like, the way in which she communicates the gospel is like a mother feeding her child Gerber baby food with infinite patience as the child continues to spit up each bite. She's like, no, no, no. She's like, this is good for you, and
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be nourished by it. And they were, and they converted in incredible numbers. So, Our Lady of Guadalupe, fascinating.
Big fan. Big fan. Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of all of them. I remember, I think it was Fulton J. Sheen talked about how Fatima, the place of pilgrimage, and the apparitions of Fatima as a location has become a place of penance, whereas Lourdes is a place of faith, and how both are important. But you see those at probably two of the most popular pilgrimage sites and apparition sites in Europe. But he spoke of them that way, and to see like, how neither of those images and neither of those apparitions or places of pilgrimage, they don't contradict each other. They both are actually building on each other, but they focus and highlight a different aspect. And I can think of oh man, it's Rosa Mystica, the apparitions of Our Lady of Rosa Mystica, how she refocuses on the Eucharist and the priesthood and the sacramental engagement with her son, and helps to increase the devotion to that with certain messages. So I think it's really a beautiful thing, but it is about that kind of maternal reminder. You use this off air, so I don't want to steal it from you, but it's about like the mother kind of constantly reminding you to do what you're supposed to, right? Clean your room, clean your room, clean your room, like get your house in order, like return back to my son, return to my son, return to my son. And it's that just repeated reminders that we, because our fallen human nature, we're finicky. We lose focus, we forget things, and we need that kind of maternal persistence that she hasn't, that she's going to continue to remind us in that way.
Yeah, I'm thinking one of my, like formative experiences as a child is when like what do you want from your parents? You want them to love you, you want them to trust you. If you get other things besides that, it's like, wow, in addition. But basically you just want to know that you are good, you want to know that you are trustworthy, and then that makes you to be so, because in the eyes of your parents you are made what you hope to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as a result of which, it's very disconcerting when you disappoint your parents. And your parents,
Yeah.
they try to kind of soften the experience of it. They don't try to communicate the full weight of their disappointment. But when you know that you've disappointed your parents, you're like, oh my gosh, I am a turd.
Dude, the worst line, I'm not
that's
upset,
like,
I'm just disappointed. It's like, oh my gosh, I did it. I'm not angry. No! I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah. No, my parents were relatively, what would you say, chill about these types of things. They had infinite patience with my hijinks, so God bless them for it. But Our Lady of La Salette, she basically comes to express her sorrow at Francis' sins. And some of the words that she uses are just brutal. She says something like, my son's arm is very heavy. It's like, oh my gosh, you talking about his smiting arm? Now, this is a very peculiarly 19th century apparition, which expresses itself in very peculiarly 19th century form. But you feel that. I went to La Salette. This was actually a hilarious trip. I was there on the way to Lourdes during the semester that we spent in Austria. And everyone else went through Paris. I went through Grenoble, because La Salette is just to the south of Grenoble, but it's straight up into the Alps. There's a bus that goes there, but it left earlier than I arrived in the city. The taxi cost like €300, which was not going to happen. Never will happen. And let's see, to rent a car, you had to be 21, and I was 19 at the time. So I did what every normal person would
19-year-old American in France would do.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I rented a moped. So I drove a moped through a variety of, like dubious roads, some of which were major autoroutes where people were cruising by me at an alarming speed. But mostly just straight up into the mountains. And at times I was going like a whole 12 miles per hour, where it's like I could have skateboarded faster. It's fascinating. But I arrived there in addition to like taking 1,000 deep breaths on account of the fact this 2 hour and 20-minute trip hadn't killed me, though it ought to have at a variety of points, especially when it started raining. I arrived and I just felt our Lord and Our Lady's sorrow. Now that's, I mean, have I felt anything in my life? No, I'm of Irish descent, so I don't know what feelings are. Right. But there was a sense in which there was like a kind of brooding sadness which hung upon the place, and something that kind of got into the bones of both of the visionaries, like Melanie and Maxine. They both tried a vocation, they both left, they both experienced, just great difficulty throughout the course of their lives. I think the curé of ours didn't even believe them. They're like, "What's the point, Our Lady? You just come to us. This is just ruination and woe." But it's a reminder of the fact that sin is terrible, right? And sin does ruin your life. And Our Lady kind of directs our attention to that in a very simple and maternal way, and then sends us on our way. And let me say that being sent on my way coming out of the Alps was a rush. The fact that I didn't die, also a miracle. So evidently Our Lady had plans for at least the next day of my life. It's hard to say anything beyond that. But yeah, La Salette. Ooh, I don't know if I'm ever going to go back there again.
Not on a moped, bro. Like, oh my God. You were going down that mountain a little faster than 12 miles an hour, huh?
I was, yeah. It was, I was. It was kind of like in a cartoon movie where the cheeks start flapping and the eyebrows get plastered to your forehead. It was one of those things. I tried not to think about the fact that I was certainly going to die if I ever made a false move. And it was great. And I arrived, I returned my moped, I ate a pizza, I got on a train, I fell asleep. It was great. Yeah. So, all right, I know you've been to Lourdes for the
yes,
for the trip that was done each year with Steubenville from the Austria campus. But I mean, in the time that we have left, any other favorite go-to places in which you experience Our Blessed Mother's love and care in a peculiar way?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little more proximate, but I would say the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. I mean, we lived right across the street. True. I went there all the time. I mean, I would just walk across the street and, duck into every little chapel. Specifically the Lord's Chapel there, I felt definitely a lot of peace. It's kind of this very, this very cozy, peaceful chapel there. Happy to say that, all my major moments in my religious vocation happened there. So solemn vows, diaconate ordination, priestly ordination. So there's like a deep reverence and sense of this kind of new birth through my religious vocation and priesthood that's connected there. But yeah, I think that shrine itself is a deep place of pilgrimage, and there's definitely Our Lady's presence and maternal care throughout that entire place, through all the upper church and all the different shrines and mosaics that depict her in the variety of apparitions and national patronages and all that stuff. But I would say for me, even though most people think it's a domestic and what good can come from America with like the history of the faith, but like there is a true sense of Our Lady's maternal love and care in that place. So yeah, I think that would be the other place for me.
Nice. Big thing in the life of my family, my own personal life, was Medjugorje, which for a while the church hadn't made a judgment on and the local bishop was not so keen on. But subsequently the Vatican, after having sent a couple of commissions, has judged positively on the first few days of the apparitions. Now, mind you, it's been ongoing for 40 years, so that's just the beginning. But yeah, my family, we went together in 1991 for the first time, and then went back in 1996, and then my parents started leading pilgrimages there, like once, twice, even sometimes 3 times a year, of folks from our parish, from the area, from the U.S. more broadly. And it became a real source of grace in the life of my family, in the life of my parish, and then in my own personal life, so that the summer that I got pumped about becoming a Dominican, a priest, we went to Medjugorje. It was great. It was a hilarious trip. And then in concert with that, I read a book about St. Thomas Aquinas, and I was like, let's go. Blessed Mother, St. Thomas Aquinas, what else is there in life? I want to love the Lord this way. But
it's a good one.
For me, like a lot of it is a good way. Yeah. A lot of steps along the way were precipitated by like gems that had been mined in Medjugorje. I remember actually like the moment where I recognized the fact that faith wasn't a feeling, because I was searching for the feeling so hard, because I'd been to youth conferences and people were just jazzed about Jesus, and I was like, am I dead inside or double dead inside? And in Medjugorje, there's a recognition. It's like, hey, chief, No big, all right? What matters is that you show up. What matters is that you believe. And to believe is to think with assent. And assent means that it's a choice, you know? So you don't fall in and out of faith like you fall in and out of love. You just choose to show up. I give you the grace to do so, and we go from there. And I was like, all right, I can do that through like much blubbering tears, like faith isn't a feeling. Oh. So yeah, I'm just profoundly grateful for all the ways in which the Blessed Virgin Mary has made the Lord's love known to me in places like Medjugorje, Lourdes, Fatima, etc. Because it's been a huge part of my walk with the Lord, my life of faith. So boom.
Let's go.
All right.
Go.
This is us just living our best lives, living lives for the Lord with Blessed Virgin Mary's intercession and encouragement. So we hope that these Marian graces, if they are not already a part of your lives, that they become so, not because we are Mariolaters, but because we are profoundly human, and that obtains in the order of nature and in the order of supernature. So you have a mother in heaven, and she loves you. Boom. Thanks to all of our supporters. If you'd like to tithe to our work, please check us out at patreon.com/Godsplaining. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, all of which helps to get the word out so people can listen to the podcast and hopefully enter the church next Easter at UVA. Visit godsplaining.org to shop our merchandise, which we will be updating shortly. Stay tuned for that, based on the new rebrand. So cool things coming out. And get dates and information for upcoming Godsplaining events, the coolest of which are the 3 retreats, which are to be this summer, July and August, in New York and in North Carolina. So go to godsplaining.org to get details and to apply for those things. All right, our prayers are for you. Please pray for us, and we will catch you next time on Godsplaining.